Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some and or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today, we have Sam Altman's Worldcoin rebranding to World with a bunch of updates about their new orb and a new chain. Number two, Venmo's 60 million users in the US can now buy crypto using Moonpay. And on the crypto coin side, Doge is up 11% as majors are stable. We'll do a little bit of an analysis there in just a little bit. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs, plus an awesome conversation with Vyas from Eigenlayer, which is, of course, the biggest restaking protocol on Ethereum. Vyas is a founding team member and heads up strategy at Eigenlayer. So we're very much looking forward to discussing both product and the business aspect of Eigenlayer's tremendous growth. So stay tuned for that. Today we've got Legendary and Bread in the co-host seats. We are ready to get into it. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice, because this market is very, very risky. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Friday. It is the 18th of October. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, doing quite well. It's been a busy week. We have done quite a lot of progress on finishing the last bits of the rebranding of the modern market, getting a very good amount of clips and videos out, professionalizing all the operations behind that. That's extremely satisfying on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm extremely tired as well. Yesterday, how I tried to avoid the meme coin trenches, at least the nighttime trading trenches so far. I did dabble into that, stayed up until 3 a.m. and I'm tired, and I'm going back to thinking the yield farming, the airdrop farming, the DeFi protocols is just more my thing than staying up and trying to catch bids on Photon.
I definitely hear you in that respect. A good question I asked you before the show, I didn't get a final answer on. You said you were up one soul on your trade, but one soul plus experience. How valuable is that experience, Legendary?
The experience is very valuable because it's telling me, look, I had deposited 100 Sol. So basically, I'm up 1% on that, which is ridiculous. But the experience is telling me that I'm better at doing other things. Like yesterday, we talked about unfair advantages, and my unfair advantage is definitely not staying up in the meme trenches. And I'm also getting older. I had the post yesterday saying I'm 33 years old. I'm not sure, is that too young to be old? Is it too old to be young? Somewhere stuck in the middle, but definitely too old for the meme coin trenches.
Well, arguably your experience there is worth zero then, because you're not going to be in that career as a meme coin trenches trader for very long. But maybe the previous experience is showing you that that is not the way to go. Interesting stuff. Bread, you have been on the move as well. Can you disclose your location? You are set in an interesting location.
We're still in Vietnam, so I'll give that away. What I didn't tell you is I literally got to my hotel 15, 20 minutes ago. At this point, it's got all set up. I'm doing this. What I didn't tell you why that happened is because I booked a flight for yesterday. I actually booked it for next Friday. So I got there, got all ready to get checked in. They're like, bro, you're a week early. So I had to scramble. I missed my flight. I had to get another one that day. So it got cut a little close. But to be honest, hearing Legendary talk about all of his work that he's doing, I don't know if you guys saw, but I am tweeting my dick off these days. That's the work I'm putting in. And it's got me up to top 10 in KOL mindshare or whatever on CT. So I'm putting in the work. I see you guys are fading behind. I'm actually older than Legendary. So to hear him getting tired, showing age, and he's, I still got a few years on him. I'm putting in the time, Ledge. I need you to keep up. There's greener pastures.
Tweeting. I love the tweeting. I love the posting. My engagement's been pretty good recently as well. Congrats on the top 10 mindshare, but it's not, I don't find it as exhausting as just staring at a screen and checking every meme coin and seeing, is it a buy? Isn't it a buy? We have lots of things to get into, but before we do that, Funky, you have your hand up. Let's hear from you on our discussion so far.
Jim, you're all young. Stop it with the old business. You're all young. We're all young until we're dead. Don't forget it.
Love it.
Good. Great perspective from the resident.
Age is a mindset. How about that?
There you go. As I said, lots of stuff to get into today. Let's get you all up to speed. Starting with the price action and the headlines, as usual, come from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. We have Bitcoin is up just a percent or so, 67.9K. ETH is up almost a percent at 2.6K. Solana up a percent at $153. Getting into the headlines themselves, we have Sam Altman's Worldcoin rebranding to World with new orb, which can perform AI operations 5 times faster than earlier models. Number 2, Venmo's 60 million users in the US can now buy crypto using Moonpay. That could be quite significant as well. And then also on the price action side, Doge is up 11% as majors are stable. Doge typically moves towards the end of a cycle. That's what I'm hearing on the timeline. That's the position that's been put forward. We'll have a little bit of analysis on that coming up. Some notable sales from around the space. This very nice Azuki water selling for 45 ETH. NFT market for Azuki is still pretty desirable. CryptoPunk Big Shade selling for 35.2 ETH, and the Boo Bear in the Bearer Chain ecosystem sold for 14 ETH. Legendary, let's head over to the NFT marketplace, see what's going on that side.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the JPEG majors. Bored Apes are having a great day. They're up 1.75% over the last 24 hours at a 11.0 ETH floor, basically unchanged, basically stable over the last 7 days. Pudgy's down just 0.5%, but still above the 9 ETH floor, 9.04 ETH floor for them. Miladys, who had that insane run, they're up 40% still over the week, 4.72 ETH floor for them, down 3% from yesterday, so did correct a bit, but not to a very, very significant extent. Azuki's are up 1.4% at a 5 ETH floor. Miladys getting kind of close to them. They're kind of getting in range, less than 10% away from flipping then. Also because it's the end of the week and we do it occasionally, let's take a look at the ordinal side of things again. We have Gizmo the Cat as a new collection, getting quite a bit of traction. That's also following the Gizmo the Invisible Cat rune that had quite a good run. Currently, I think there's 40 purchases pending. 0.002 BTC floor, still up 400% from the mint price on that. And in terms of some other collections that we talked about also throughout the week, we had the Based Angels, where we said they are like kind of in this Milady, Remilio family, if you want to put it like that. They're up another 40%. Just Stefano had brought them up. I think he bought them like 3 months ago, up another 40% over the last 24 hours, 0.0185 BTC floor for them. In terms of some of the bigger collections, Bitcoin Puppets down 7% at a 0.16 BTC floor. Quantum Cats up 1.6% at a 0.25 BTC floor. I think generally we're seeing a fair bit of volume, but what we're definitely seeing is that this Milady Remilio family is showing quite a bit of strength in the derivatives on the BTC side. We also had Rune Milios being up 60% at a 0.012 BTC floor, but arguably also all of those collections are still at a relatively low market cap. Despite being up 60%, we are talking about a $2.7 million market cap, but just wanted to bring it to the attention of what's happening on the BTC side of things.
Yeah, makes sense. In addition to that, I think the whole of the ordinals ecosystem has been re-rated up a little bit a while ago. I think people decided that had gone too low versus every other, whether it's the NFT asset class or even just as a proportion of Bitcoin's market cap as well. So that was kind of re-rated. Getting into the other Web3 roundup to get you up to with the rest of the news, the FBI arrested a man responsible for the SEC hack, which falsely stated Bitcoin ETFs were approved in January. You remember that moment, which was pretty comical, where the SEC got hacked to approve Bitcoin and everyone got super excited. Apparently, it was Eric Council Jr., a 25-year-old Alabama man in connection. Yeah, so they found the person. There's some funny additional emails or Google searches that apparently they found. I'll try to find those details in a moment. Next, Kraken launches KBTC, a competitor to other wrapped Bitcoin products like CBTC by Coinbase. That's interesting to note. Smart contracts are now live on Bitensa. That's obviously the Tau ecosystem, which a lot of people are excited about. Solve announces pilot LST for Bitcoin on Solana. Seeing all these kinds of varieties of staking and restaking now. Quite a lot. The Ethereum phone called DGen 1 is minting now on base for 0.2 ETH. That's pretty exciting. A response maybe to Solana's successful phone from last year or earlier this year. That's pretty cool. Wallet Connect on-chain UX ecosystem airdrop registration closes today. And finally, on the art side, Sotheby's to auction multiple pieces by Botto, the decentralized AI art project. That is very cool. Good to see that success. Any quick points out of the other bits of news there? We're going to get into the headlines in just a moment. And then obviously we've got the big conversation with Vyas from Eigenlayer coming up today on the half hour. Looking forward to that. Any other points you want to pick out, Brad, first, maybe?
Yeah, honestly, I saw the price of that. That I don't think it's a phone. It's like meant for to be like a everyday carry around gaming thing. Like that. At least that's the ad that I saw for it. I saw 0.2 ETH, and I was like, that sounds pretty fucking expensive for a phone. And then I started doing the math in my head and realized, we pay like $1,000, $1,200 pretty easily for a phone these days. Yeah, it's like that's half an ETH. Holy shit, we pay a lot of money for phones these days.
I know what you mean. That's the exact. I think I had a very, very similar reaction, but then it's funny that you actually compared it to real life phones, and the only thing I did was compare it to how profitable it was to buy the Solana phone, which provided, I think, if you didn't really sell anything, like 2.5 grand's worth of airdrops. So like either way, as you say, it's kind of at a discount versus the real life phone cost or how much you might potentially get in airdrops. Although there are 50,000 of these, which is more than the supply of the Solana phone. So I don't know if that can work in the same way. Legendary. Before we get to the headlines, come in on this.
Yeah, I'll give it to them that the design is a bit outstanding. It's not like your typical slab. It looks definitely different from that. That's cool. Just for that reason alone, I do want to have one. Because I also have obviously a Solana phone, and I'm still like very spoiled by the airdrops that we get there. But to Brett's point, I think phones generally are way too cheap. Like it's the device that you use the most. You use it, I don't know, 6 hours, 8 hours a day. 8 hours you sleep, so basically you use it half of the time that you're awake. And compare that to a car that you maybe use like, I don't know, once, twice a day, once, twice a week, if you even have a car, and we just still pay 1.2, 1.5K for a phone. Phones should be way, way more expensive. I think Warren Buffett also said that they should like trend more to like 4 or 5K, not actually be affordable that you buy them straight away, because they have become the most important device and they're way too affordable for that.
This is a man who just justified buying a 5.5 grand PC. So he went through the same rationale in his head. He's like, I'm on a PC all day. I need to spend as much money as possible. It makes perfect sense, guys.
It's Degen math.
Yeah, so the way Legendary does it is he has the PC on all day, sitting there with the phone right next to him, scrolling on all day. That's the only way to justify it. But then there's also these, you've got like 4 phones now then, Legendary. You've got to be multitasking across all of them to justify it perfectly. But as you say, it does look pretty fun. Look, we need to get into the headlines because we want to make space for a really fascinating conversation we're going to have today with Vyas from Eigenlayer. So let's start with number 1, Legendary. Doge is moving. Wondered if you could just put this in context a little bit and share some of your thoughts here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do this. I'm sharing an article from the LA Times that's titled "California Officials Reject More SpaceX Rocket Launches," with some citing Musk's X posts. Elon commenting under that a couple days ago. Doge will fix that. Doge is also the Department of Government Efficiency that he has talked about a couple of times. Definitely not the only post on that, definitely not the only reply on that, and has helped Doge majorly throughout the week, because up 10% on the day, as you said, but also up 24% over the last 7 days. We compare that to some of the other major memes. We have Shiba up 9.5% over the last 7 days, 4.4% over the last day. Pepe up 10% over the week, 2.5% yesterday. Dog we've had 4.3% over the week, 3% yesterday. So definitely a strong outperformance on the Doge side of things. You previously said that we see like Doge typically move more towards the end of the cycle. At least that seems to be the sentiment on the timeline. I don't think that's something that I like necessarily agree with. I still think it's like highly dependent on the attention that basically Elon is also driving to Doge, because while the impact is not as big as it maybe used to be in the last cycle and a cycle before that, it's still the case that his replies or his posts do carry a very fair amount of weight on that.
I think that makes sense. I know Brad does not have more on this specific topic, and neither do I, to be honest. in general, the meme coins have obviously pulled back a little bit since the real hype a few days ago. So things are a little bit more stable on that side. Let's keep it moving into the second headline today on Moonpay. Brad, you're just going to break down what the news is, how significant it might be, and any further thoughts.
Yeah, so this one is an integration between Moonpay and Venmo. Okay. The thing to note here is the direction in which the integration is, right? And that's kind of that's what dictated my excitement for it. Because, right, so like it's a Venmo or a Moonpay user now getting access to their Venmo account, right? So you're not getting brand new users in Venmo or in Venmo, which is the wider distributed platform, right? It's Moonpay users now have access to their Venmo account if they have one to buy things on Moonpay, right? So that kind of reeled in my excitement a little bit, right? Because you already have to be a Moonpay user. And guess who's already a Moonpay user? Probably crypto people, right? It's not a net new additive thing. And then I started thinking, because I actually have a Venmo account, I started looking at Venmo because Venmo has a crypto tab. It's always had a crypto tab for a long time. So actually, I didn't have it set up. I went through the setup process, and yeah, I could just straight up buy Ethereum, Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin were the other four. So it's like in my position, maybe it gives me access to a few more assets. They mentioned dozens in the article, but broadly, like it's not really an exciting thing for me because it's not exposure to net new people. It is the people that already had exposure getting access to more funds potentially. So, yeah.
That's a great distinction, picking up on like the direction of the relationship between the different apps. One maybe general question, maybe it's a bit of a personal question, but just a general sentiment check. Personally, I have not experienced many of my friends or family or anyone really be that specifically interested in crypto in the last few months, even though we are approaching the kind of heights, very close to all-time highs on the majors, with the meme coins ripping in pretty unpredictable and crazy ways. I haven't really experienced anything. Is that just me? How have you seen that kind of separate demand?
Yeah, so I would agree with you. I haven't like had people reach out to me and like ask for stuff really broadly. The one thing that I will note that probably shows a little bit of, and it has Moon in the name, is the other Moon token meme coin. I forget what that is. Moon.
Moonshot.
Moonshot. Yeah, Moonshot actually, I think it reached like top 50 in finance or something like that recently. So like it actually, no, it flipped Coinbase wallet. That's what it did. So like that was starting to see some downloads and actually gain some traction. So like it shows me that those types of people that are interested in that kind of stuff, yes, maybe are like in the back alleys leaning into it a little heavier. But like, yeah, it's not like a normie thing. Taxi drivers telling you to buy the token level yet. And I think that will come through the brands that right? Like that'll come through the Coinbases, the whatever. So or the Venmo, the I won't say Moonpay, right? Like Moonpay to me is not a like normal person forward brand. They are like, I guess, someone that comes up whenever like things are needed and you start Googling around like, oh, this thing showed up in Google ads and therefore I can do the thing now. But it's not something that just like sits in everyone's phone naturally.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Legendary, any final reflections there on your side?
Yeah, one of the things that I like to track is, because I very much agree with what Brett has said. I'm not gonna repeat all of that. But one of the things I personally like to track, there's a website in Austria that's basically our version of Craigslist, where you can like buy and sell used stuff, and it has like a full text search, so you can also like search for what is in the description of everything that's being sold there. And I always search for ETH, BTC, and stuff like that to see like how many things are listed where people say, I'm also open to take your coins, basically, when I'm selling, I don't know, a laptop, a mobile phone, some shirts, or whatever it is. And I track that and I see that number increasing. And that's something, again, it's not massively empirically relevant, but it's a number that I like looking at. I even said it with the MacBook that you mentioned before that I upgraded to. I basically reached out to 4 people and asked all of them if they would take either BTC or ETH, and 2 of the 4 said yes. And that's, I don't know, like, I know that Funky thinks I'm spending my sats on consumer goods and I shouldn't do that. But it's interesting to see that people are like open to that. They're like, yeah, it's actually like money and I have a Binance account. I don't want the BTC. I'm just going to sell it for fiat, but I don't mind if it's easier for you to do it like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe it's becoming slightly more normalized to trade with it, even if the majority of people, maybe from a commercial perspective, people are getting more comfortable with it. I remember speaking with some of the lawyers that I used to work with, and they were starting to become open to the idea, basically because as soon as clients start saying, will you accept it, they then start to opening up to it. So maybe from a commercial perspective, they're like, look, okay, yes, you might be able to purchase this in ETH, for example, this real estate or something like that. Whereas the average person, I think it will take significantly longer for them to get comfortable with it because there's no one specifically dragging them.
One more quick
All
example
that
on that.
moneyness, boys. That's really hard to quantify, but it has value.
Yeah, that the distrust is increasing. My watch dealer, he takes cryptocurrencies, and when I bought my first luxury watch off him, that was like 3 years ago. It basically worked like this: you get an invoice, and he said like you have 15 minutes time to send him ETH, to send him not stable coins. He was only taking ETH back then. 15 minutes time, and otherwise you get like a new quote because he didn't trust ETH for more than 15 minutes to get it and convert it into fiat. And now he accepts it. Like if you purchase a watch, he sends you the invoice, you have 48 hours to pay. Like his window and time of confidence has massively increased, basically by a 96x factor.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's a great indicator. As that window gets bigger and bigger, you'll have a good indication of how things are being perceived. I like that a lot. Let's get into our final headline for today. This is a pretty interesting one. This is to do with Worldcoin. Just 1 second. So on the first kind of setup information, Worldcoin is rebranding as World, launches a new skyball scanning orb. This has been redesigned. It has 30% fewer parts and triple the production capacity of its predecessor. The interesting part, so this is what the CEO had to say. They said, we know it sounds crazy, but it is that Worldcoin, as the name, just doesn't work anymore. Starting today, what has been called Worldcoin will just be called World. There's a bit of information shared about the orb itself and how that's slightly better. Obviously, there's been a number of privacy concerns relating to them having this kind of information on people. The interesting thing from maybe a more blockchain perspective is the scale of this already. I think this is something that goes under the radar. I know crypto specific people are more skeptical towards this whole mission, but they seem to report pretty significant numbers. So they say World App Wallet is already the third largest crypto wallet in the world, with over 150 million transactions and $1.5 billion in transaction volume. With World App 3.0, the wallet has been re-engineered to be even more useful. For starters, it will now support World Chain. This kind of feeds into this conversation we've been having before, where everyone's kind of spinning off their own chain in some capacity. In addition, the redesigned app will make it even easier to use. There'll be World Pay, which allows you to pay any person, merchant, or app around the world for free in just seconds. New ramps that enable people to deposit and withdraw funds to World App more easily, and a new vault. So this is very much being pitched as the kind of, when I was reading this, and you can see this on the screen, remember I'm showing this, we're live on video, live on YouTube as well, the super app for humans. And it kind of reminded me of what Elon's vision is for the X app when he talks about it as being the everything app in some capacity. So interesting stuff going on there. We've probably got time for a comment from one of you, maybe Legendary. You come into this since you are investing in phones routinely. Is this the type of app that you would be using? What are your thoughts on this news?
Okay, I had the same thought as you with the comparison to what Elon wants to build with the Everything app, and basically his starting point being to buy X and take it from there. And with now World building all of that out from scratch, and not even being like able to have a user flow that is coming from the ChatGPT side of things, from the OpenAI side of things to World, is definitely the more challenging one. And it's all about the users that you can acquire and the users that you can retain maybe on a platform that they've been using for a while. So I think vision is interesting, but hard time to execute that when you have competition from the likes of X, where you just have a different starting point, a different strategic approach with that.
That makes sense. Final thought from Brad while I just get Vyas up on the Spaces platform as well. Final thoughts, Brad?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I always like how they do marketing talk for a lot of these things. It said third largest wallet with 150 million transactions at 1.5 billion or whatever in volume. And then I think like that's a single shitcoin on a single day, probably thrown around on Phantom. So like, I don't know, like you can always pick out anything to say like how popular they are in these marketing materials. I don't know that, like I've never heard anyone ever refer to this World app as their wallet. So I don't know, skeptical of some of the numbers they're giving you, but yeah, we knew they were going to launch their own chain. They're on Optimism. They were originally there. They're going to launch their own. They did that. So none of that's like that surprise either, but it's progress.
Yeah, healthy skepticism, as you say. It's so often the case. We see all kinds of numbers being thrown around and can't necessarily verify in the way that you'd like. So yeah, I agree with that. To be healthily skeptical is good. Let's move into our headline interview for today. Absolutely delighted to welcome Vyas from Eigenlayer onto the show with us today. Eigenlayer is, of course, the biggest restaking protocol on Ethereum. Eigenlayer is now the third largest protocol in all of crypto by TVL with more than $11 billion and has more than 10 billion more TVL than its next competitor in the restaking market with almost 10 billion more TVL than Symbiotic. Vyas is a founding team member of Eigenlayer and is now more focused on the Eigen token in his role at the Eigen Foundation. The Eigen token has fluctuated between $5 billion and $7 billion FTV since its launch and is currently sitting at 5.8 billion, making it the 126th largest coin in crypto. In this conversation, we'll discuss Vyas's history and his reasons for signing up to the Eigenlayer vision, the Eigenlayer protocol, including its potential as well as its challenges, and the token itself and how we can expect it to be leveraged in the future. Vyas, welcome to the show. How are you doing? Great for you to be with us.
Doing well, guys. Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Yeah, all things well considered, the X account just got hacked quite recently. So I'm getting blown up on the side here about how we're triaging that at the moment. But things
Awesome.
are going well.
We did wonder when we saw it in the morning, just like, is he going to be here on the show? Like, we'd completely understand. We've worked in different scenarios as well, where when there's an emergency, sometimes people need to drop and like take care of stuff. But I understand your team is on it. Hopefully, that's being mitigated like as soon as possible. So to be clear for the audience, the Eigenlayer account has been hacked at the moment. So don't click in there. Look, let's get into the story, Vyas. We have so many questions for you, and we know we're going to have to be fast because we want to try to get to all of it. Just to maybe set the scene for our listeners and viewers, I wanted to ask how you specifically got involved with Eigenlayer. When was that, and what was it about Eigenlayer's vision that attracted you?
Yeah, absolutely. I started with the founding team about three and a half years ago now. It was May of 2021. And I was coming out of a role in the cross-border payment space, the TradFi space, where I was looking at a lot of B2B payments and remittance and these things that I thought would have been solved by DeFi, right? Like just overnight could have made a massive difference. And so um, for context, I had been engaging with crypto before that, but mainly as a trader, mainly as a bit of a degen, going back until like maybe 2015. And then Firam, the founder, was actually going on his sabbatical, his first year of sabbatical from the university, and we had a former um, personal relationship. He's been my mentor for the greater part of like 10, 12 years since I was about 15 years old. So yeah, it actually wasn't even about the Eigenlayer idea at the time that made me join, but rather knowing that the opportunity to go and start and build something with this person and this core team probably wouldn't show up again. And so initially we were building some other stuff, and then we probably got to the original white paper for Eigenlayer around November of that year. We started the first demo of data layer at the time, which is now EigenDA, in December of that year, which was coded by one of our early founding engineers. Literally, like the initial code was done over a weekend, just staying up, like cranking through it. So that's kind of the early timeline. And then there were a lot of inflection points following that really took us from that initial stage to where we're at today.
Amazing. It's you mentioned some of the products that you started coding back then. Brad definitely wants to dive into the product itself and get people to really understand what you guys are doing. We'll do that in a little bit. Just to respond to your first point, it's so amazing how we speak to a lot of founders. We actually speak to a lot of artists as well now. Every Tuesday, we have some of the top artists join us, and we kind of ask, like, how did you make the connection with, like, how did you get the deal done? We've got all these artists coming on who are working with Shape, specifically this new L2. And 9 times, like every single time we have this conversation, it's always about a personal relationship. You think that there might be like, well, they promised me the most money, or but I thought it would be a super lucrative opportunity. But people always say something like we just said, well, I knew this person. I knew the person who's building it. And that's what kind of inspired me. So it's fascinating to hear that. Maybe getting people up to speed with just how you then progressed through. I was looking at the kind of funding rounds, and in March 2023, you guys announced $50 million in Series A funding. This would have been back pretty much in the depths of the bear market, I think. How did your raises go before that, just so people can like place your trajectory? And then how did that one, which I believe was the biggest field to secure back in that bear market, was it an easy process because you were such a leading innovative protocol, or did that downturn in the market make it tough?
It definitely made it tough. I would say the first, we all took different positions in that first year. So like I took a very low salary. We all like kind of put as much money back into the company. Sriram was paying people out of pocket. It was like that first year was definitely an interesting experience. And then, even before that Series A raise, the seed raise was a $15 million round. And, that was during markets that were pretty tough as well, right? We were dealing with Luna at the time, and then during the A, we were dealing with the crash of FTX, and then thankfully the B didn't have anything going on. I think that's the one that like kind of just like was smooth sailing. But yeah, there were the markets definitely delayed things. It made funds more hesitant to deploy. It definitely like threw a wrench in timelines, but at the same time, I think our product vision was so clear by then that there wasn't really too much differentiation in the A. I think the seed felt a lot more of a riskier investment to some VCs because of how we were still trying to communicate to the market what restaking was. And there were initially the most risks that were presented by the community. And it really became a question of like alleviating each set of those risks, even with investors initially, which eventually became how we communicate that to retail and the users as well when it comes to what sort of risks are they getting involved in, and ensuring there aren't what we describe as like cascading slashing risks, which is the main thing that people are worried about. Hey, like how much of this security is has these interwoven relationships that we're going to end up dealing with some sort of debt spiral event. And Eigenlayer's core focus was to prevent debt spirals. So yeah, we can get into that as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's really, really interesting. I think we were speaking just before the show, and you mentioned that even though it might have been harder, building in the bear is the way to go, rather than the money may come more easily in this time of the market, but doing it that way round is probably better. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where like being observant of markets is important. Being hyper aware of them is like unhealthy for builders. I think builders should build agnostic of markets and agnostic of token price because they've identified some sort of either value add or arbitrage, right? And so like that should exist independent of the market. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to see multiple cycles. Your meta is only going to get you're only going to retain that arbitrage for a short term of a cycle or maximum one cycle. And for us, we're trying to build a project, a team that lasts 30, 50, 100 years. And takes off alongside the crypto industry for general purpose infrastructure and adoption. And so with that sort of mentality, there isn't a single point of arbitrage that you're trying to identify and capitalize on over a short-term cycle. So yeah, I think building in the bear and deploying in the bull and seeing how the markets react is invariably where we all end up. But trying to be observant of token price while building is a recipe for disaster and just like sleepless nights and anxiety and all that.
I like it. I think that perspective is quite helpful, to be agnostic to the market and just stay focused, I think is wise advice. One more for me before Brad gets into maybe some more of the technical stuff. One of the biggest questions in crypto, I think, is how to attract TVL. Like, I think you may have had an innovative protocol, you may have had this great idea, but still you need to go out and attract the TVL. And we mentioned already, Eigenlayer is the third largest protocol in all of crypto by TVL, with more than $11 billion now. I think it was even higher before the token launch. How did you guys do it? How did you attract the TVL? What's the secret?
Shout out to our amazing staking team at the time on the strategy team, and then now the commercial team at Labs who's taken over that. Absolutely incredible group of people to work with, and honestly a multifaceted strategy. Part of it was going after it was, hey, how do we first of all enable Ethereum restakers to earn more yield for doing more work for supporting these protocols, right? And so when we announced that, we also candidly had a first mover advantage by defining this restaking category. And so part of it was, one, we're going to go to as many Ethereum whales, we're going to go to institutions, we're going to these sort of traditional funds in order to acquire TVL. And then the other thing was and I think this is one thing that was interesting about us compared to other infrastructure projects at the time, is there was no way for retail to interact with the infrastructure layer pre-token, right? So for example, if you're a data availability service and you're only a data availability service, unless you're really a roll-up developer, I don't interact with the infra until token goes live and I can trade the token if I'm a retail user. Whereas with us, there was the ability for retail to come in, deposit LSTs, and participate in the ecosystem, even at a very low barrier to entry of cost, right? And then that only got even easier to do with LRTs, as they kind of came in and created their own, landscape and stakeholder group where they were able to acquire and attract TVL.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the first mover advantage, because there's been some discussion on that on the timeline recently. I think Hasib from Dragonfly shared a tweet where he was kind of questioning whether there is a first mover advantage, and Luca from Pudgy Penguins commented on top saying our advantage over the last couple of years has actually come from being second movers. And I think sometimes his perspective was first movers in crypto tend to blow up, while second movers learn from their mistakes. But I think for you guys, it's definitely been advantageous being in that position that you were. Look, I know we definitely want to get into product. We've got a few questions on token as well. So I'm going to hand over to Brad here to get into some of the product stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, nerd corner. Let's do this. So first of all, you've already dropped some acronyms that I'm sure have just whizzed right over the head of some of our listeners, because it's a broad spectrum. So I'm going to start base level, right? Talking about Eigenlayer, the protocol, right? So for everyone who's not aware, they only know Eigenlayer by name. So I think at this point, everyone knows it by at least name. You guys are very big. Eigenlayer as a protocol has given birth to an entire ecosystem above them, and that is embedded within the Ethereum network, right? So you have Eigenlayer, the protocol, providing security as a service to all of these things that would have necessarily created external networks to Ethereum, right? You need to go spin up a validator set, a blockchain, a bridge, a whatever. Now they can just opt into that with a subset of Ethereum validators, with people that have opted in to do that work for them. hence, like, so TLDR is right. They're reusing validators from Ethereum. They're staking, hence re-staking. Yeah, one reason that's good is because traditionally, like when these people do this stuff externally, it costs a lot. They have to give away token incentives, all these things, right? That cuts into security. No one actually can price security in this sense. So it's become a opaque market. Eigenlayer hopefully is going to bring some clarity to that. But TBD on what the actual pricing looks like. Anyways, I'm sure you've practiced a bunch of pitches for Eigenlayer. First of all, how was that pitch? Just short and sweet. And what has become your one-liner for Eigenlayer, because it is such a very nascent and complex protocol?
Yeah, 100%. Today, the pitch has evolved over the years. Initially, we were Ethereum's restaking protocol, and the focus was how do we you touched on this just a second ago, Brad, but you know, you can account for the token incentive costs, but you also need to account for the human resources cost of time required to bootstrap, build, validators, stake, and that itself can take 6-12 months, where now you have this like very hefty payroll cost and like operations cost in addition to the actual like cost of bootstrapping a trust network, right? So initially it was, we are Ethereum's restaking collective, and the purpose of Eigenlayer is to bring innovation back onto Ethereum that was going and fragmenting itself into all of these trust networks, as well as provide them with a economic backstop or like economic security that would prevent death spirals that were cataclysmic in the previous cycle. Today there's two active pitches based on how you interact. I think one is a very developer focused pitch and one is a retail focused pitch. The developer focused pitch would be Eigenlayer converts cloud to crypto. How do we take existing Web 2 infrastructure, and the way we think about the Eigenlayer protocol is very similar to decentralized SaaS, right? Decentralized software as a service, or decentralized infra as a service, where all of these protocols that are building on top of us play a very infrastructure heavy role, and we kind of become this sort of AWS style, like one-stop shop of a Web3 equivalent service. And then the retail pitch, and this is something that we're still in the process of like really explaining, is Eigenlayer can be a protocol where credible commitments are enforced economically, right? Credible commitments are kind of the core value proposition to all blockchains. And so like, how can we create a economic marketplace that like people can have and generate credible commitments regardless of what chain or what ecosystem they're in? And the reason we're not as Ethereum coupled in the recent positioning is partially because of some of the upcoming initiatives to support all ERC20 assets, partnership with Athena for USDE, along with EtherFi, or with BTCFi, and like enabling other TBTC and other BTC assets on Eigen. So while the economic security might be coming from other places, when Eigenlayer itself becomes a place where credible commitments can be written and enforced, the underlying economic security can come from different sort of smart wallet infrastructures or smart contracts, different types of smart contracts, but still be attributably enforced and used for slashing conditions and redistribution for lost funds.
And so I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit, because you basically just read through what my next question was. I literally said, you guys talk about bringing the cloud on chain, and users aren't going to, like today, users, because a lot in the crowd are like their users, right? They're consumer crypto. They're not going to feel or really interact directly with Eigenlayer, but they do feel or will feel Eigenlayer because of the infrastructure that's enabled. That's the AWS stuff, that's whatever. So although, like, even if we just talk about pre-comps, which like, no one, you guys aren't going to know this too deeply from a technical perspective, but like for people in the crowd, you click a button, you submit a transaction, instantly you're able to move on, right? You get that confirmation that's enabled by, or can be enabled by, something like Eigenlayer. So that user interaction, that thing that they feel, that they click a button and they instantly get feedback, is enabled on the back end by an Eigenlayer that allows for these protocols to be propped up using, again, a subset of Ethereum validators to just speed up and enhance the UX rather than more.
I think you're touching on something deeper there too, Brett, where like this is part of my take and my thesis is like end consumers at the end of the day should not even know sometimes that they're interacting with crypto. They don't need to. They don't need, like, most of the tech can be abstracted away. You don't know that your application that you're interacting with in Web 2 is being hosted on Netflix, on AWS, right? But like you still use Netflix, or like there's plenty of SaaS modules that interact with everybody's user workflow that we're so accustomed to. And unless you're a developer or you're a nerd, you're not going into trying to learn what each of these modules does. But the reality is it just works. And similarly, I think we're a little bit hyper obsessed with trying to couple great tech and build the great UX ourselves. And I think one thing that Web 2 taught us is decoupling those things is a great opportunity for actual like user adoption.
Oh yeah. And so we try to keep this one quick so we can pass on a ledge for some token stuff. If you had to pick a single, so just to paint the structure, protocol, Eigenlayer on top of our Eigenlayer, AVSs, actively validated services. These are the individual apps that are enabled by Eigenlayer. Of all of those, you don't have to name names. What is the sector of AVSs that you are most excited about? You don't have to go too deep in expanding on it, just when you're, that interests you.
Absolutely. I think the Oracle space is very interesting to me. What does verifiable data look like on blockchains is something that's very important. Oracles also have a very tight coupling effect with exchanges and dexes in terms of price feeds. So these are like really important things that you want high degrees of economic security for. I think the other thing that excites me is bridges, especially long tail. I think bridges are going to be able to use one of the kind of research projects that we have that will eventually come out to the protocol itself, which will be StakeSure, one of our as we refer to as like Eigen insurance, where the idea is bridges and bridge users will be able to buy insurance to protect assets in transit, similar to how when you ship a package, you buy insurance to protect the value of the package. And so will that matter for a consumer that's making a small swap? Maybe not. Will that matter for an exchange that's moving a lot of assets? Probably. And so these sort of underlying insurance mechanisms, when you're bridging large amount of assets, can start creating a high degree of trust.
Hell yeah. Let's flip it over to Ledge so you can round it out with some tokens.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brad. When you read about Eigenlayer and the Eigen token, I think there's one word that keeps standing out, and it's the word intersubjective. And the self-description is Eigen is a universal intersubjective token. And I think it's a big word, but I think it's also very, very important in line with some of the core ideas behind that. When you talk about the setup and the execution phase, when you talk about token forming, and you have those two concepts of universality on the one hand, isolation on the other hand. But I think it would be very, very helpful to hear from you what it means and what the best like prime or the explanation of that would be when you say that Eigenlayer or Eigen is this universal intersubjective token, and what that also means for the future of the protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this also ties in with this idea of like making credible commitments that I touched on earlier. And so the idea is there's a lot of objectively attributable faults that can be slashing conditions, which are, hey, like you were supposed to run this specific container of code, and that specific code was supposed to yield a specific result. And these things are very observable, and X number of people got the right results, so therefore like the code was correct. And so whatever individuals got incorrect code could be slashed for some sort of very objective attributable condition. The problem is we have a lot of situations where it's not necessarily clear when who was necessarily objectively correct, right? And this is where social consensus often gets involved, and this word gets thrown around, and it's just a fancy way of saying like, okay, like who among us actually has the right result, right? And how do we come to some consensus as a group? Now, the reality is like there's a lot of situations where the subjectivity doesn't matter. right? My favorite example of this is like, what's everyone's favorite restaurant in London, right? We're gonna have a very different take and a very different like approach to it. And the reality is there is no need for social consensus there, right? We can agree to disagree and we can all move on. That's totally fine. Now, however, like let's just say we're all waiting on the result of a betting market that's highly driven around social attributes, and so like we all have different positions on it, but yet the betting market won't, resolve itself unless we come to some social consensus. If we start escalating every single one of these issues to the Ethereum base layer, these things would get extremely expensive, extremely complicated, and now we're abstracting away a social, in protocol slashing risk to something that's on the Ethereum native protocol, which just like inherently creates more issues. And so the main focus behind the intersubjective token is how do we tackle some of these like not necessarily objectively verifiable slashing conditions and social consensus problems and bring them to within the Eigenlayer protocol and come up with a way to do that natively. This enables the token to have its like specific utility that can be used in EigenDA for resolving the data availability problem, which is a known social consensus issue. We can use it for a bunch of different use cases, like Brett mentioned earlier, fast pre-confirmation. So when you're dealing with ordering of transactions, you can verify that somebody was actually verifiably before another person, and how do you solve the consensus of the ordering there? So there's always these interesting touch points, and so and this is where I'll get very, very mildly spicy. There have been plenty of projects in the past where like the only product was the token itself. And I think
Yeah.
we partially saw it as a challenge to make sure the token was a product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I would love to explore that in so much more depth. But just with regards to time, I'm gonna move to another aspect of the token because I think it's a very relevant one as we see more and more protocols doing that. Eigen in the beginning wasn't transferable. The token then became transferable, and I think you've been the first like major protocol doing it in this way, and we definitely are seeing this becoming the norm more and more. And I would be like very curious to hear from you a bit more about on the thought process to make that decision and start in a non-transferable state of the Eigen token.
Yeah, I think there's a multitude of things behind that. Part of it was one, getting to the point in our internal pipeline where we felt confident with the reward structure, the payments protocol, all of these sort of smart contracts that are required for the appropriate distribution of airdrops to users before the token became transferable. I think the second part would be, actually bootstrapping this ecosystem of protocols that we're building on top of us, like AVSs. And the other factor, which honestly played a lot of the role in decision making, was legal. And like, how do we be mindful of the regulatory landscape and issuing these tokens to users while also, um, you know, protecting the crypto community and the natural ethos of like wanting to be able to participate and engage with these sort of protocols. And so uh, part of the lock drop strategy was around that. And yeah, we're super excited to support that.
Love it. As a former lawyer, I'm very appreciative of the legal hurdles that teams have to go through. And I definitely understand that a lot of other people may not be privy to those endless conversations that you have to go through from the legal side. So I appreciate the context there. As we draw to a close, Vyas, maybe just looking forward, Ethereum mainnet has experienced like quite a lot of FUD recently. There's a lot of conversations about to what extent activity should be incentivized or optimized to be on mainnet versus all the L2s that are spinning off. Do you think Eigenlayer will be responsible for, or is it aspiring to kind of bring some of the energy back to ETH mainnet in any way?
Absolutely. Our focus is to be, again, I mentioned this earlier, but like bring innovation back into the Ethereum ecosystem. I think the app specific L2 thesis makes a lot of sense, especially because being able to have control over your sequencer gives you a lot more functionality. I think there are some exciting things that are being enabled in the L2 landscape, and so I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, because the reality is Ethereum becomes the base layer where everything gets verified, and so I do see that as a positive effect. The problem we have today with the saturated L2 landscape is L2 interoperability, right? How do you interact with Ethereum when there's so much fragmentation? And I actually think it's going to be an interesting problem that is we can apply like a Web2 look at a Web2 lens at, because classic, Microsoft heavily fragmented operating system, or Google heavily fragmented operating system, large user acquisition, versus Apple, vertically integrated supply chain, a lot more restriction, and we're starting to see but then way better interoperability, and so we're starting to see similar design patterns play themselves out in crypto. Um, the best example I would say is like Solana versus E, right? Your Phantom wallet on Solana just like works across everything. And on ETH, you might have, one L2 which supports wallet X, which might not be supported by the other L2. And so you're running into these sort of user experience interoperability issues, which I think is what really needs to get resolved. And we're excited to support some teams who are actively working on interop and things like that.
Very exciting. Definitely needs some energy brought back to the Ethereum ecosystem, I think. As we draw to a close, then, Vyas, is there anything else you'd like to share? You've taken us through a bit of the journey from the history, the product, and then also on the token side. What are you kind of personally looking forward to next, either from a personal perspective or from a foundation perspective?
There's a lot of fun things to work on. I'm super excited about this Athena partnership, the BTC partnership. I know we have a lot of other prominent projects who are doing TGEs in Q4, which we're excited to help them support. And then the other thing is, with we still have the token team at the foundation that's actively working on grants and onboarding more and more teams and going about that process. We also have programmatic incentives, which are predictable liquid rewards for stakers and operators that have been going live, weekly Eigen emissions and incentivizing securing AVSs. And then downstream, a lot of interesting governance, a lot of interesting, just like decentralization initiatives across all of this. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things that we're excited about. I'd say the last thing is probably EigenDA. EigenDA is like something that we ran a couple of campaigns around this, but like all chains live on EigenDA, and the idea is like we're so far ahead in terms of throughput today, in terms of like what we could actually do. So how do we onboard all of these additional like what would it look like? The meta question we have is like, what does the infrastructure need to look like in order to onboard 10% of like Web2 traffic? And in order to port over that traffic and build the infrastructure required, what are the parameters of these systems? So there's a lot of fun stuff that we could get into, limited amount of time, but I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, I'm just seeing Brett's comment in the private chat. As you say, wish we had so much more time to talk about all of that other stuff, because I think the DA side is probably a whole different aspect to be able to dive into. Maybe we'll have you on again one day, hopefully, to maybe get into some of that stuff.
Would love to, guys. Anytime.
Thanks so much for joining us, Vyas. And thanks so much, as always, for joining us in the audience. We do this every single day, Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour. We're live on X video and YouTube as well. We also publish to Apple and Spotify, so you can catch us there if you prefer. Have a wonderful day. Take care. We will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.